Cool. Thanks, Nick. I just flipped on recording, and thanks to Brandon for the reminder. Um, Nick was just describing some of the UX research that we've been doing and inviting everyone on the team to be a part of that. I don't know if everyone's seen the fact that there's now an analytics calendar, but I'm going to sticky the related URL that you need in order to add that to your Google Calendar. Well, feel free to. I assume that if you see a meeting on the analytics calendar, you're more than welcome to attend. So we'll continue to use that as the single source of truth for different events and so forth. The last bullet that I added to the agenda was an issue on process. So I noticed that the planning process for analytics seemed to be a little bit different than the rest of Manage. Hey, Dan, great to see you. And I wanted to see about how we can get that documented and ideally added to the handbook. And I had some specific suggestions in the comment that I left, but I would love to just better understand, since this is the first kind of planning cycle that I'm participating in for analytics, what's been working well, what's hasn't, how can we kind of improve our planning processes. And since 12.6 planning is upon us, and like this week, we should kind of have like the first cut of a tentative release by end of week. I'd love to be able to incorporate that so that we can try to solve for some of that. Also, Dan and Dennis were kind of interested in Kanban, and I was interested in what everyone else thought. So I will shut up for a minute. So planning, what's been working well? What hasn't been working well? Where could we improve?
I think from a front-end side, it's been very difficult having the UX research, the back-end, and the front-end all being delivered in the same milestone, especially getting towards the end of the milestone. It's put a lot of pressure on everybody.
Yeah, from the backend side, and I'm talking about whatever I saw up till the end of September. Our breaking down of our iterations were not so nicely planned out, and they were more from the focus of having an MVP instead of considering that this is a very new feature that is very backend and database heavy, and our iteration should be at that level as well. And maybe after one or two iterations, we would get to the point of having an MVP. That would have been a lot more productive.
So taking time to break down like our issues a little bit further is kind of what I'm hearing from that statement. Like, does that sound right? Would that kind of solve that challenge? You feel like we were tackling things at MVPs, which is like to what I hear is too large, and that required us to like use many different releases to deliver it. But you're seeing that maybe we can break that down further into 1 or 2 releases per MVC.
What I'm trying to say is that what iterations we planned were from the perspective of product, whereas for something like laying the groundwork for a new feature, we needed to do a lot more backend work as well, which should have been the first iterations. Yeah. So yeah, definitely we should take more time to plan things out, but like we should also remember that it's not always that there will be some part of the product that's working as part of an iteration.
How could we have solved for that problem? Like, would, for example, us taking more time to discuss like the proposals from product, like would that give engineering a chance to kind of break that down and like come up with a plan to say like, actually, like we need to do the back end work first. So like we're going to sequence these things and we won't be able to deliver anything for end releases or whatever. Like how could we have solved that problem in hindsight?
So what I saw was towards like from maybe September, we got really good at this and we started breaking things down and asking to push back on the larger iterations, breaking down issues. We should have done that earlier, and I think we can do more of that. I don't know what October would have been like because I was out. But definitely setting aside some of the release cycle to write down implementation issues is what I would want engineers to do more.
What changes did we make in September that made that happen?
Things just went spiraled out of control. There were really big merge requests where it was just absolutely needed to break them down. And then it started becoming clearer that some of the implementation issues were not designed in such a way that you would have something of the product working, but they were I was just breaking down my MRs into smaller backend things.
Okay. So like what I proposed in my like comment there was, I know, so what Liam's team is trying to do is just do a lot more of estimation work. So there's like the date, I think it's the 10th, as I recall, that we have like estimation kind of has to be completed. So what Liam is proposing on doing is like assigning different issues that product is proposing to individual engineers for them to kind of like have a think and break down the issue and give it a weight, to try to force some of that thinking and that conversation ahead of the time before we actually like commit to a particular release. So I don't know if that's a positive idea, but that's kind of one thing that I'm thinking about. And I think that estimation has like helped manage, I mean, like at least Liam's side quite a bit, because we were struggling a little bit with biting off too much in a particular release, and I think estimation has kind of really helped. So I think we want to try to do more of it. But Dan, I don't know if you have any feelings on what we might consider doing differently this planning cycle. I know you mentioned Kanban, but I'm not sure how that would actually work in practice.
Yeah, right. So there's the Kanban idea, which would just allow us to kind of get away from the release cycles, and more specifically kind of scrambling at the very tail end of a release cycle to make sure something gets in, just because that distracts us and kind of disrupts us and reduces our velocity overall, I think. But in terms of, I don't think Kanban does anything on the topic of like getting us ahead of things. I think, really just kind of investing in the planning, not just saying like, yeah, we think it can make it into the next milestone, but actually digging in, assigning it a weight, like really understanding technically what's involved, making sure everything's broken down sufficiently, which is something I think in recent months, the analytics team has started doing more of, breaking things down. Pavel did it for predefined type of work, like broke it down into data harvesting, any like backfill migration that was going to take place, and then just all of the different pieces. And I thought that was really successful. He just did that right at the beginning, and that was kind of something we learned through experience, like with Code Hotspots. Like, we just need to break this stuff down. Code Hotspots and Creedy did the same thing, but it was just later in the process. So we're just kind of learning as we go along that with these big features, we really need to get way out ahead of them in terms of, first of all, understanding them and making sure that they're minimum viable product, like really super minimum, just because they're also big. And then just breaking down into chunks, estimating each chunk.
How have we done that from a process standpoint? So like, Pavel, when you estimated that feature, like, was that part of like our process, or is that just something that like you decided to do?
You mean the breakdown? I've estimated the small parts. I've like read the feature, created a plan in my mind, brief how it will look like probably from implementation wise, like splitting into 3 or 4 tickets and then estimated them separately, like added weights.
Do you think that we should do that for every single thing that we work on?
I think we should try not to, like, if a feature is small, it's will not require small tickets, but if it's something bigger, then it can be split like backend wise or like technology wise or in some way, then I think we should do it. Yeah, because bigger tickets will still have only one big MR, then it will be pretty hard to review, and then reviewers will definitely ask to split it out, and so on and so on. Then we can go with one issue but multiple MRs, that doesn't give much sense of a progress. I think because like you've been working, you've merged like 2 MRs, but still no issues were closed, something like that, and not quite visible which parts exactly were done. So I think it helps with bigger features. So I think we should do it where possible, where it's like we have a nice way to split.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So what I proposed in the handbook was that like we never start work on an issue before it's like estimated and broken down. And if we introduce something in the middle of a release, we have to take something out of equal weight. So everything needs to be estimated. We don't like just put stuff into release and expect that to be delivered. We have to take something out as well. So I'm going to open an MR that proposes that we do the same for analytics, because it sounds like breaking stuff down has like been really helpful, and we should ideally do more of it. So if you have any ideas about how to like enforce that as part of our process, that was my idea, which was just like we just never start work on anything that's not weighted by the engineer who's going to work on it. But if there are other ideas, like feel free to suggest them in that merge request. So I'll open that today.
Just one more thing I'd like to add is I liked when Adam and we were discussing for core hotspots, work according to what would go into each merge request. That was a nicer way for me to estimate work than just the weights. So like planning work out in terms of what merge request would this take, treating them as units of work was nicer.
Got it. I'll also feel like ideally, like we should have an issue for every merge request, and as much as possible, there should be a 1-to-1 ratio between closing an issue and a merge request. Okay, cool. I noticed that there were some issues that had like tons of related merge requests, and it becomes really hard to grok kind of what's going on. So as we go, like it's as part of that estimate breakdown, like creating separate issues, like Popple said, like and then having merge requests that close those specific issues, I think is a really good model. Cool.
I also wanted to underscore something that Brandon was talking about in terms of UX research. That should definitely be done before we even start talking about any sort of execution of the feature itself. That is something we've definitely struggled with. It's just kind of everything getting jammed together, just kind of separating it all out so it's a little more sequential. We're trying to figure out how to execute back end and front end at the same time. We have some ideas for that, but I think UX research just has to come first.
I think that's a great point, and thanks for bringing it up, Brandon. I would also say that like everyone should feel licensed to say no to that model. Like if you think that something's not going to work, like just say no, I can't commit to this because I think we need to do the UX. We can't do UX research front end and back end at the same milestone. It's just not realistic. So I think that sets boundaries for product to. So like we will try. I think that's great and admirable, but like. It helps us as product managers set expectations. If you say, no, I don't think that's going to work in a nice way. So please feel free to say that in a nice way. But yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that's part of the reason why we're trying to do the UX research now, and then in 12.6, hopefully do some design work so that we have these questions answered and we're not repeating that same thing. So great points. Thank you all. Dan, do you want to talk a little bit more about Kanban? Like, is that something that like you're curious to try? I'd really welcome an MR to like see if we can give that a try. Maybe probably not in this coming release, but maybe the subsequent one would be really interesting. I know that Gio's been doing it. They've been really high on it.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll go ahead and get an MR together, but I think basically the thing that we need to figure out is how we handle kind of the pre-release announcements. The post-release release post, that's easy, right? We just say, whatever was in master on a certain day is what we're going to be announcing. It's just kind of a question of whether we even attempt to say what's going to be in the next milestone. I think there are going to be cases where we can say, yep, this is definitely going to make it, and other cases where we're not so sure, and maybe we don't want to mention that in the announcement, or maybe we just don't participate in the announcements. I don't know. But otherwise, I think it's going to be, that transition would be fairly straightforward. Of we eliminate kind of the deadline of the release, and we just, we focus on chunks of work, get them executed and wrapped up and merged in, and then move on to the next thing. Without consideration of the milestone really much at all, aside from what do we announce or what's in the release post.
What's the problem that you feel like we solved with that?
So again, just that scramble at the end of the milestone of like, okay, with this thing, we have to have it merged in. So, let's call in favors and let's make sure maintainers get pulled away from their work so that they can review this thing and get it merged in right now. So like, not only does it force us to scramble and pull us away from what we're actually working on in the moment, we then go to other people and pull them away from what they're working on. So it ends up just being this like roll-on, this knock-on effect of just everyone getting pulled away because we made a little bit too big of a promise in our announcement, and we're trying to hold to that.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Like whenever I've worked in organizations that have like some type of like hard deadline when it comes to a release train or something, where it's like leaving the station no matter what. Like with the Scrum type model, everyone tries to jump on the train, but with Kanban, like, and they don't start things that maybe is the most valuable work because they're like, we're a week away. Like, I don't want to start on this like 5-weight thing, even though it's really the most important thing we've been working on. And I think that should be the model, which is like, we're always working on the most important thing. So I think, I definitely think it's worth trying. I think I need to just wrap my mind around an MR that like kind of defines that process. So maybe that we can kind of work on that and then give that a try in like 12.7 planning cycle, which will be in about a month. I actually think it'd be really interesting. And I don't really care so much about the specifics of the kickoff. Like if we only announce 2 things that because they're just like sitting in the top, like, 10% of the backlog. We can just prioritize stuff that we really think is important, make sure it's sitting at the very top, and then try to get to that, sooner rather than later. I don't know how that works with. I know that they're also introducing WIP limits in boards that will also help us kind of limit the amount of like work in progress, which will be nice. I wonder how that'll work when we have a particular. I mean, if like our issues are so atomic that like anyone can pick them up, but if we wind up with like a lot of work that like where there's a lot of, knowledge that's like in one person and like only a couple people can actually pick up an issue and like not everyone can actually pick up stuff equally from the backlog, I'm not sure it'll work super well, but we'll see if it works.
Yeah, that sounds good. And let's go ahead and work on that MR and kind of figure out the details.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks for the great conversation. In closing, last bullet point. Are we still doing the social call? How's that been going? I've never participated in one. I'd be curious to know.
So I think we just sort of switched it to being officially a social call in the last call. So I think technically the one coming up, I think it's in maybe 2 weeks. Hopefully that will be a hit. Cool.
Awesome. Love it. Sounds good. I will find that on the calendar and make sure it gets switched over from Virginia's calendar. So
cool, perfect.
Thanks.
And there was some talk of us playing this game on that call, Agario or Agar.io. I don't even know, but it's like this funny blob game. So everybody practice. We can all be on a team and rock it at Agario.
I love it. I love it. If you have any other ideas for games we can play in calls, I'm 100% for it. I'll start an issue on that.
Awesome.
Too.
Yeah, we should have a list.
Cool. Great to see you all. Thanks for the great discussion.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Have a great week.
Bye, everybody.